literally like.
All right, I am joined now by Debbie Moak. Debbie, thank you so much for joining me. You are the founder of notMYkid.
Yes.
And that is an organization that really just focuses on improving the lives of youth and making sure they don't fall into the traps that are out there.
Very well said. And one of the ways that we go about that is by employing young men and women who are in recovery and working with them and taking our messages directly to students in the school setting, as well as parents and faculties across Arizona.
So you know about this documentary that's airing.
We do, and we're excited about it. It's a long time coming.
So, I mean, can you talk about just, I guess, the heroin problem here in Arizona?
So heroin, this is a topic that notMYkid has literally been watching since 2005. In 2005, we knew at notMYkid that we had an epidemic brewing. I don't know if you recall, but during those years, there were about 11 drug dealers who were arrested, and cell phones were tied to thousands of our Arizona youth and heroin. So here we are finally in 2015,
Right.
10 years later, but I'm at least glad to see that we're ready to begin tackling this here in Arizona.
Right. When we announced to our Facebook page that you were going to be here, we actually got a lot of questions and comments that I want to pull up now. I'm going to just grab those here. We have a lot of them. Okay, I kind of want to start with some of the comments, not the questions,
Sure.
because a lot of people were coming out and sharing their own story almost. And it was really... It was nice that people were able to just come out and speak.
Well, it's
without
understandable.
that fear.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and pull that up right now. So this is from Elizabeth Dabrowski. Now, Elizabeth is saying that it's absolutely true. The only outcome from this is death or prison. My son died in November from that narcotic. He was 24. He used it for several years. It is the hardest drug to stop using. At Amanda Stevens, just search opiate addiction. It seems like she was responding to someone else on the thread. But, I mean, when you read stuff like that, I'm sure you hear that stuff all the time. This is coming from a mother. And it's, I mean, that's the whole, concept behind the name, notMYkid. It's from that parent perspective.
Well, I know exactly, first of all, what it's like to be that mom. I'm
Right.
fortunate that I still have my son today. And Elizabeth, I am so sad for you. This is why we're doing what we've been doing for the past 15 years here in Arizona at notMYkid.
Right.
We see all too often kids starting down this path, and our job is to prevent. We're out in the community working hard to make sure our kids understand the risk and consequences of heroin and other substances. And then we find ourselves in the position very often of helping families to intervene and turn it around by identifying signs and symptoms and what does this look like, what might I find in my kid's room, and then what are the resources the community has to turn this around.
And before I go to our viewer questions, I actually just one popped in my head. How are kids typically exposed to the drug in the first place?
Yeah. Well, here in Arizona, we have two primary ways. Number one would be drugs coming across our borders. Literally, we in Arizona supply about half from Mexico, about half of the consumption to the U.S. of heroin. But it comes through Arizona first. The other way is the connection to painkillers, which are the number one abused category of drugs in this nation. Oxycontin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, Vicodin. Those are opiates. So if you like that feeling, then very often we'll find that kids will change from, it's harder to get an Oxycontin pill and more expensive to get than to switch to heroin. So coming across our border, typically here in Arizona, we see number one, black tar heroin, as well as brown powder heroin.
And I mean, is heroin and the feeling of heroin comparable to that of oxycodone or Vicodin?
It is.
Okay.
And actually, I read a blog by a young man who's in recovery just the other day, and You know, he described it in the beginning, at least, as very different than a cocaine or meth, where with cocaine you may feel like king of the world and all powerful, and meth just, you know, extreme energy and euphoria. I've heard it described more as just feeling right with the world. And this is the battle. When you like that feeling and get used to that, literally, the longer you use it, the harder it's going to be to get off, and your body goes through aches and pains and withdrawals that are unbelievable.
It's actually interesting that you brought that up right now, because
Yeah.
the next comment that I'm bringing up comes from Trisha Joy, and she just comments that it's not easy to stop anything cold turkey, and it's impossible to wean off heroin. Therefore, detox and recovery of this and other opiates are harder to get through without succumbing to the mental anguish
Yes.
the mind puts us through, thinking we need the drug to survive.
And I would say to Trisha that this is also a substance you're not going to go into a 28, 30-day treatment program,
Right.
and you're all fixed. First of all, the detox process alone is lengthy.
Right.
Just to even begin to get the drugs out of your system and start through any type of recovery.
Right.
So this is, once these doors are open, a heroin addict will tell you, it's certainly possible. Recovery is possible. But it's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Is it the hardest drug to recover from?
You know, there are a lot of drugs that are very difficult to recover from. Certainly meth, certainly heroin, I would put at the top of the list. But a lot of people are dealing with a lot of substances. I'm not going to minimize the withdrawal of cocaine or any other substance.
All right, well, I want to, we have a lot of comments, but let me pull up questions. I have at least 10 questions up here that I want to get through. This first one, Michael Graff. If you use heroin, what is the average amount of time someone can use the drug until they're addicted?
Wow, that's a great question, Michael. I don't necessarily want to say it's a first use. For some people, it's more gradual. And also, I would say to that, what are you starting with OxyContin? Or are you starting directly with heroin? It has very much to do with how much I weigh, how much I use, what are my personal propensity, maybe genetics, toward addiction. But you would find that heroin addicts would tell you it does occur rather quickly.
Got it. Okay. Well, thanks for answering.
For some people, it is first time.
Right. Yeah, this is actually someone who was responding to Michael on the thread and just said, one time the high is so high and euphoric, then you never get it again. You chase that euphoric high feeling sad. I've seen so many addicts in my town.
So what Jill is actually referring to also is called chasing the dragon.
Is that
it's a term for generally your first high, and what a heroin addict will do then is chase that high for as long as they're using, looking to replicate that very first euphoria.
And is it very difficult to replicate that?
It never
feeling?
happens again.
I see. And they just think that if they keep going, it'll...
Yes. Oh, so think about that. What would you do if you're not feeling as high and you don't have that sense of euphoria? Use a little more. Another slippery zone is combining it with other things to produce that euphoric high.
Right. Now we have this next question from Los Cueveras. What's what's your view on the legal drug methadone that is given to most heroin addicts to help them kick heroin, and they only become even more addicted to this legal drug, and it's okay because the methadone clinics get rid? Okay, well, that's an opinion, but I think the question here more so is, I mean, where does methadone, what role does it play?
You know, I think that's a great question. I know it's a very controversial question. Personally, I have to say, I feel there's a place for methadone in recovery. Do I want to see an addict simply replace heroin with any other substance? If it is something that is utilized to step down, monitored, and appropriately used, in recovery. I think it has a place. But I also believe that too often it's just simply switching out one drug
For another.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for that question, Los Guevaras. We're going to go to the next one. This is from Andrew Day, and it was like a three-parter. Wouldn't it make more sense to legalize it and let Darwinism take its course? Haven't we been losing the war on drugs since the war began? As sad as it is to watch a loved one fall to addiction, shouldn't people have a right to their own bodies, or does that okay, and then another opinion, or does that only apply to women in terms of abortions? I think keeping it on topic with heroin, I guess, like, in what role does the government play when it comes to, these illegal drugs?
Right. Well, Andrew, I would say that it's a very important role that our government does play in keeping many dangerous things away from individuals, not only drugs.
Right.
We can think of other examples that the government does play a role in keeping its people safe.
Right.
So on the one hand, I'm all about freedom and choices and liberty. I get that piece. But when it comes to a substance that is taking the lives of 46 people a day in this country,
Terrible.
I am simply not okay with giving people free will around dangerous substances.
Right, and I think, just to piggyback on that, isn't it, a lot of people, they just need the help to recover. It's not like they're using this for fun. If you don't have a source or a way out.
Right, that's well said, yes.
Yeah, and that's what you guys help with as well.
So
correct?
again, at notMYkid, our primary function is to make sure that we educate kids, parents, and faculties in this community, get them all on the same page about what's really happening here in Arizona, and prevent. Because again, even the best recovery rates are low. Who wants
What are the rates?
Again, depending on the individual and drug use, generally speaking, less than 10%.
Wow.
That's abysmal. So quality of life, is this a choice that we want for individuals, for our youth, our communities?
And it's also something where it's like, a lot of people will, maybe they want to try a drug just to say they tried it, and not knowing how addictive it is and not knowing the consequences. I feel like that alone, the education, is so important and essential.
And to tell you how addictive it is, I sat over at a treatment center some time ago, literally with Dr. Drew Pinsky, and I talked to a father of 3. He was in treatment for heroin, and he said, in his own words, said to me, if there was a car coming right toward my kids, and to the left of me was a hit of heroin, I would choose the heroin. How sad is that? If that isn't telling about how strong and addictive this substance is, I'm not sure what is.
That's so unfortunate. And I feel like I think that's a very big part in the fight against heroin. It's educating parents, it's educating kids about how addictive it is and how bad the consequences are.
Right. Well, we know from history that when we do a good job educating the community about how dangerous something is, use does go down. That's why tonight is so important.
Right.
When we go to sleep at the wheel, and whether we intend to or not, message to the community that all is well and safe, use does go up.
Right.
So tonight is critical for the state of Arizona to get out there. This is very dangerous, and it has, I like the promo that they're playing.
Right.
It's death or prison.
Right. This next question comes from Maddie Garcia. She asked, how much damage do you think heroin will cause 10 years from now, just overall?
Wow, Maddie. Great question. If I look back to 10 years ago, I could never fully have imagined we'd be where we are today. So I am actually going to be more hopeful that things like this, programs like this tonight, will wake up the community. One of the things that we have to do, for example, Florida had a huge heroin problem. What did they do? They reduced the number of painkiller prescriptions, and actually overdose has gone down. So we have to understand the link to prescription painkillers.
Right.
We have to reduce those and take a lot of that supply out of the community, and then we will reduce heroin addiction.
So do you think it's on the doctor's part to maybe prescribe something like ibuprofen, telling them to get over-the-counter Tylenol, for example, Advil, things like that? Do you think that'll, I mean, because...
I think that's certainly
Right.
a piece of it. If you look at what's happening, typically you'll find in any state that a large number of the prescriptions for painkillers
Sure.
come from a small segment of doctors. Why are they dealing with so much pain
Right.
and so much of the prescribing?
Similarly with dentists, though, I mean, I know I've been prescribed both Vicodin and oxycodone just from dental visits.
So I'm curious, I would ask you, when you stopped using it, what did you do with your prescription?
They're still in my cabinet.
And therein lies part of the problem.
Oh, I'm in
Not
trouble.
for you, right?
Right.
I'm not clearly worried about
Yeah.
you, but I am worried about who comes into your home and takes that to either use or sell.
Right.
You literally, by not properly disposing of that, you're helping to keep the supply available.
So what is the proper way to dispose of these kind of drugs?
You know, my favorite way to get rid of it is to crush it up, put it in a baggie with something gross like kitty litter,
I see.
sawdust, something
Sure.
that you're not going to then ingest.
Right.
Because what you don't want to do, you don't want to take this and put it into the water system,
Right.
flush it down the toilet or anything. Certainly, law enforcement has drop boxes. That's great. But again, my favorite way is just get rid of it by
Right away.
making it unedible.
Right. All right, we have some more questions ahead. I feel so bad. I feel like I was just got in trouble. I feel like I have to go home now and open my cabinet and, I don't know, start crushing pills.
Good.
Let's see. We have this question from Amanda Stevens. Amanda asks, what are the signs that someone might be using? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. Typically, I would start with a pinpoint dilated pupil, lethargy. You might even see someone that's on heroin literally fall asleep while you're talking to them. The head just kind of droops and they nod off. Very often, when everybody else in the room may be warm, they are cold, very cold. Depression certainly is a sign of heroin use.
Right.
And there are other things, many other things that they go through,
Right.
such as vomiting, nausea, constipation. And I just ask your audience, does that sound like fun? Is that, let's go use heroin? I mean, if you look at the side effects from this.
Right. And again, that goes back to the whole educating people point.
Right.
I mean, I know kids out there, they do want to say they tried a drug, whatever. It's the cool thing to do, but this is a really dangerous one
Yeah.
to try. Obviously, it would be great if all kids out there weren't trying any drugs, but to know how severe the effects are and the influence that heroin specifically has I think it's so important that kids learn about it because,
Right.
growing up, I mean, in 6th grade we had the DARE program, and it was just, it was a general say no to drugs. But I don't really
Right.
think that I ever got the education on really the side effects of very specific drugs and that step. Like what we're talking about now is something that I think I should have. I mean, I've never done heroin, but
Well, I
something
think-
that kids need to know.
Again, you just mentioned something that is important to me as well. notMYkid doesn't take that type of approach in education. Here we are working with real young men and women who have a minimum, and by the way, out there, if you have a minimum of a solid year of recovery, come talk to us. Interview at notMYkid. We may be able to work together to educate more young men and women in the community about the dangers of substances like heroin.
Let's see. We have another question. Trisha Anderson. Why isn't there more treatment options here in Arizona? Why is it so difficult to get someone help?
Wow, that's a great question too, Trisha. It is challenging. I'm not going to say it's not. Certainly, finances, let's be honest.
It's expensive.
It's very expensive to go to rehab. We know that it takes a long time. Most people will go into treatment, then they'll maybe move into a sober living house or halfway house. Here's what I would say. There are treatment programs available, and as a matter of fact, if you or someone needs one at notMYkid, we will and can help you with free resources to get help here in Arizona. But Trisha's right, it's not easy, but it does exist. So if you need that kind of help, contact us at notMYkid. Specifically ask for Sam in the office and he'll help connect you to free resources. The other thing I would add, not again that this is the easiest route, there is a meeting on every corner of almost every hour in this valley for recovery. So the resources do exist. You may not be as familiar as we are at notMYkid with them. And if that is something you need, give us a call and we will help hook you up. She is right though. Do we need more treatment options, better treatment options? Yes, we do.
Is rehab something that's covered under health insurance? Or?
You know, it's a good question. For some insurance it is. Very often it isn't. Sometimes your insurance may pay half.
And you might need a really good insurance, and maybe some of the people that are using maybe might not have as comprehensive of a coverage.
Right. Well, the other thing, here in Arizona, typically insurance tends to pay more for what's called IOP, intensive outpatient. That can be effective for some people, and certainly if that's all you're offered, let's run with that. But I prefer personally residential treatment programs, and as long-term as you can make it. There is a direct correlation to recovery to the number of days in treatment.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
So it's good that, I mean, I guess the more treatment people can get, the better. Right. So, by the way, all you viewers out there, you can leave comments via YouTube, and we can bring some of those up and talk about them. We actually have one from Summer Chambers. Summer asked, how come the police don't pick up the ones walking the streets that seem to be under the influence of heroin or methamphetamine? I can point that out in my town. Get them off the streets, please.
Oh, well, that's a really great question. It certainly makes me sad. I, feel like I may have seen one
just here,
pulling in here. I'm one of those people. Summer, I personally wish I could go out and round them up all myself and put everybody in a house and let's all get healthy together. I really do feel that way. I know that's kind of crazy, but I care about addicts so much and what they're going through. I don't think it's not that they're happy and having a great time and want to stay in that position themselves. This is what they've gotten themselves into.
Right. And
we need to do a better job, A, preventing, but B, supporting our addicts in recovery.
Right. Right. And actually that is a great lead into our next question from Trisha Joy. How can people detox from heroin safely without medical intervention?
Wow. I would certainly prefer to see anyone who's trying to detox from heroin in some type of program where they can be supervised. But certainly we all know stories of people. I literally know of a situation where a grandmother took a grandson in for a weekend, sat in the bedroom with him, and watched him detox for several days.
What is the detox process?
So, you mean just doing it on your own?
Right.
Just
like
literally
for example,
stopping.
That grandmother sitting there with her grandson and watching him. What is she watching?
Yes.
What is that?
You're probably, first of all, watching someone with a great deal of aches and pains that you and I can't even begin to fathom.
Right.
And, going through just a very scary and ugly process to get that drug out of your system. And it's not quick. This takes a very long, long time.
It's unfortunate. I know we have another question from YouTube. Stephanie Aportella. Stephanie asks, what advice do you have to those who have been using and are unable to stop and do not have money for treatment?
Again, I would say contact the notMYkid office. We do have a list of free resources here in Arizona. We will help connect you to those. You know, you can always go to an AA meeting in this town at any hour of any day and ask for help there. You can go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, literally if you have no resources. But I think step one, you know, ask someone for help through the process. But, you know, I think there are, I think I heard there are like 1,700 meetings a week here.
Right here, just for AA or heroin?
No,
just AA.
But you can, for heroin, go to an AA.
Right.
Go to a NA meeting, Narcotics Anonymous, and find help. I would also say to someone who is loving an addict, whether it's your spouse, your child, you need to get help too.
Because emotionally, it's probably so overwhelming if you can go to therapy or whatever it is, right?
It is, and I would add to that very often just by, there's a dance, let's say, between the addict and the person loving the addict, generally an enabler, someone that's helping them or allowing them, I should say, to continue the behaviors that keep them in their addiction. So sometimes when you change up that dance, you're not willing to play your role any longer as the enabler, and you're setting different boundaries, different loving boundaries.
Right.
A lot of times that will begin to change the addict's role as well.
Can you give me an example of, let's use spouse for example. How can a spouse be the enabler? And if the spouse is an enabler, what should the spouse do to change things up?
Right. I would start by going to a Al-Anon meeting, a PALS meeting. You can Google that, go online. There are meetings everywhere, and work with them. Learn how to set loving boundaries, but boundaries that don't allow the person to, for example, very often addicts will ask for money, a place to live, a car to drive, and too often we provide things that may have sped up them getting help if we weren't providing.
Right. We're getting more questions. I love that you guys are, interacting on YouTube. I think that's the great thing about doing this, digital thing that we do here, is that we can hear directly from our audience as we're talking here.
Nice.
And we just had some question from Paula Magallanes. I think I'm saying your last name right, hopefully. If my brother were to go to his primary care doctor, could that doctor prescribe him something for the detox instead of having to wait periods of time to get into a sober living place? Because the waits are so long, he loses hope and refuses to go. For example, like Maverick's house.
Yes. They all differ. Again, contact notMYkid and we'll help you to find the right resource that will help you with a detox. But, good for you for hanging in there with your friend. But at any point, they can lose their lives. So priority is taking action as quickly as you can. By the way, this is something I tell people all the time that plays right into this question. If you know you have a loved one who's using any substance, have a plan made up in advance. Generally, addicts like your friend, they
It's
have
your brother, actually.
a brother.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
even, I think, harder to, that's
Yeah.
your family.
So develop a plan and have it in place and in waiting, because sometimes addicts will have a moment of clarity. And what typically happens, then the loved ones start to try to figure out resources, start to figure out where to go first. and then that window closes. So if you are someone loving an addict in your life, let's make a plan now so that when that moment comes and you have that opportunity, that window remains open and you're able to get them help. Contact us at notMYkid, and again,
The website is notMYkid.
notmykid.org.
Okay.
And we'll help you with resources, and get a plan in place so that you can intervene
The right way.
the right way.
Okay, we have another question actually from Los Cueveras. I know he or she or they asked a question earlier. Are there other forms of heroin besides the black tar and the powder form?
Yes, here in Arizona, we also see the brown powder, which can actually look, it can certainly be brown like cocoa powder, or even lighter than that, almost a whitish substance. You know, heroin can be snorted, smoked, and injected. So if there are people listening that are concerned, maybe they heard the signs and symptoms today and they're thinking, wow, I've seen that.
Right.
But I don't see track marks. It's not the only way to use heroin. So it's something you need to be aware of. You might also see around someone using heroin aluminum foil. One side of it may be black and burned, and the other have black marks on it from smoking it. You might also find things like this pen that the tube has been cut out to use to smoke, cut off straws, things that literally, if you saw that shoelaces were going missing just consistently, could be another sign of heroin use.
Wow.
Things you wouldn't think about.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't know this had you not come in and
Yeah.
told me all of this. Okay, now this is from Chuck and Liz Herrera. Who is the typical user of heroin? Is
So-
there one?
That's a great,
You know?
I like how you put that. I wouldn't say typical because it is across the board, but what I would say, Chuck, is that the rising category right now of new users are the 20-somethings.
And is it a specific demographic of 20-somethings? Is it
Oh, no.
college kids? Is it,
Wow, good
certain
question.
incomes? Is it,
No,
it's-
this cuts across every socio-economic, race, religion. That all goes out the window. But the increase we're seeing is in the 20-something-year-old new use. I think that has a great deal to do with the painkiller connection. So if I got started on OxyContin, maybe I came to your house and I went in your medicine cabinet.
you don't know where it is. I have a lot of
If
cabinets
I'm
in
a
my
user,
place.
I would find it.
I have like 30 cabinets.
But in all seriousness, that there's a very strong connection
Sure.
to that. And quite frankly, the new user category can often come into this through the innocent door, I'll call it. In other words, I had a legitimate prescription because I had knee surgery or I had some other
Sure.
reason, legitimate.
Right.
But after I refilled it and then refilled it again, and I'm
You
on
just
my
got so
third
used
refill.
to it. That's where the addiction is formed, I'm
Well,
assuming?
it is, but also think about this. I try to stop using that painkiller. My pain is long gone. And I try to stop, and what I have to go through to stop, I just don't want to feel.
Right.
The aches, the pains, the anxiety, the depression, the panic attacks.
So you just want to keep using so that you have the more positive experience.
Well, in a sense, yes. It's like now I just need it to just feel okay.
Right. Well, those were all of our questions. I'm going to just pull up, I think we have some comments, just, people sharing their own experience. Carmen Gomez Montano, that is the enemy, and it ruins not only youth, adults, and an entire family. Seeing my ex overdosing on it and trying to bring him back to life was the scariest thing, but I didn't know he was using it until after he came back to life. I see young kids on it, and it hurts me to see it because the enemy is taking over.
Oh, Carmen, you're breaking my heart. You know, I'm a mom who has lived through substance abuse with a son. The drug of choice was not heroin, but it is devastating to the family. And so I empathize with you so greatly. I hope that this evening is just the start of many conversations here in Arizona, that we raise the awareness, because I don't want to see Carmen or any other family live through what we've all lived through. It's life-changing, and by the way, this is forever. Even if you are able to conquer addiction, it is you're a minute away from this the rest of your life.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us. All you viewers, as I mentioned earlier, Hooked on Heroin, the documentary will be on air on Fox 10 at 6:30 p.m. It'll be airing all across the state of Arizona and all the broadcast networks. Also, I believe the radio stations as well.
Yes, I think there are 32 stations.
If you're out in the car as well, you can't catch it on TV. Make sure to listen to it. And I really appreciate you coming in. I feel like I learned so much just on the topic, and I will go home. I will crush my pills.
All right. I've done my job then.
Thank you so much. And again, for all you viewers that have questions or concerns, make sure to visit notMYkid.org.
And if we can help your viewers in any way, let us know how we can be a support and resource to you.
Thank you so much. I'm actually gonna be changing topics now.
Great.
I'm gonna be switching over to Steve Craft. We have a Jody Arias update.
Okay.
Jody Arias. I see Steve over there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I feel bad about my drugs in my home. Blame my dentist.
But now you know what you have to do.
Well, I guess.